Welcome to another episode of Behind the Billboard, the series that tells the stories behind the greatest billboards of all time. And today our guest is Tim Riley.
Tim Riley, yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to Tim.
Yeah, Tim is a legend of the written word. He's the Abbott Mead head of copy. He's a bit of a legend in his own lunchtime.
We've got to ask him about the head of copy title.
Yeah, also ask him why Man United are a better team than Spurs.
Oh, so. Do we have to go there? Well, he'll be here soon, so...
no, it's going to be great. I think we'll touch on, obviously, The Economist, which is just massive. I mean, that's going to be hopefully an episode on its own right.
I want to ask him about the John Smith stuff as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the one with the best story behind I have an inkling.
Yeah, it's kind of special build, half and half Billboard stuff. It's really good.
Yeah, but he's just going to be a great person to chat to. He's worked at some amazing agencies and he's incredibly humble and I'm looking forward to talking to him.
Cool.
Tim Riley, writer, creative director, creative partner, and head of copy at Abbott Mead Vickers, and most importantly, master of the witty Instagram post. A man of many hats and many incredible pieces of work. Welcome to Behind the Billboard.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, of these titles, apart from the Instagram joke, which is there one that you enjoy the most? I imagine they're all very important, but is there one you feel most at home with? Do you prefer being a writer, a creative director, head of copy, or are they all wonderfully rewarding?
Neither, really. I mean, writer, because the thing I enjoy most is still coming up with stuff. But, whether it's writing or just a stupid idea, who knows? But towards that end of the sentence,
I mean, head of copy. Sorry, because I hadn't realised you've been the head of copy for so long.
I had a bit of a chuckle about the head of copy because I wondered if it was just kind of photocopying the bits of paper for all of the different people.
People have asked me to do that in the past. I think it's probably one of those titles they give you when there's no money for a pay rise. How about this?
Yeah.
You can put this on your
you
emails.
can print it.
Yeah.
But does it mean... I mean, for me, I imagine it might be like being a manager of Brazil or something. Do you have? It must. You have incredible.
Which manager?
Yeah.
Well, Phil Scolari.
Yeah, probably not Phil. I was going to say Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, but that wouldn't be good because we're proper United fans.
I'm surrounded by United fans.
Sorry, Dan's Spurs, but we can move away from that. But I think it must be nice having that much talent at your fingertips. People coming in to show you work. And just getting overall oversight of what's going through.
Yeah, that's good. And you also get the odd account man asking you, should I use a semicolon or a colon? And I've got no idea.
But do you have I'm always interested in heads of copy or very senior figures who... Do you have a background in English?
No.
Not
at all. I went to art college.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Which one?
Well, it's probably not one of the famous ones. Maidstone Art College, which I don't think exists anymore.
Right.
But I think Tracy Emin went there. Not when I was there.
Right.
And Oh, the guy who illustrates does Where's Wally? Is the most famous alumni.
Obviously more famous than Tracy Emin.
Well, it's between Tracy and Martin, I think.
I think you make a close third. Right?
He's no good with words, though, is he? Because there's just loads and loads of
I think he
pictures of
found
people.
2 words that worked really well, and
Hey, you know what? That could make a good billboard, right?
Yeah, why change a formula?
Yeah.
When you're looking at all the copy that's going through, where do billboards fit into it at the moment? Like right now, is there a lot of out-of-home briefs? Is there less? Is it just the same as it was?
I think there are fewer, and the last occasion I can recall, I think it was a question of, is there any way that we can shorten these headlines into less than 10 words?
Right.
Because, as you know, and as I'm sure you've discussed on previous episodes, there is a particular, not a skill, but it requires some discipline, a poster, whether it's visual or it uses words or both. But to try and distill a thought into 8 words is quite challenging sometimes.
We when we chatted to Paul Belford
the
other week, we talked about something that was circulating on social media, which was called 31 Headlines, which was 31 headlines of Economist posters.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul was saying, well, those could all work brilliantly now as banners.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same discipline, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a similar sort of format,
Yeah.
but they tend to be still get cluttered. Whereas actually, if you have just a big stonking line, you know, it's much more memorable.
There's a real craft to writing a billboard ad, though, a successful billboard ad. I mean, there are loads of outdoor ads out there that are just quite poorly crafted, wordsmith-wise. Have you seen any great ads recently, not necessarily from within the agency, but out there, that you think, well, that's a good billboard ad? There's a classic billboard ad right there.
I think a couple. The Spotify campaign that came out recently, I felt kind of foolish, actually, because having worked in advertising for as many years as I have, I should know these kind of tricks. But I saw one that said 1979 London calling, 2019 conference calling. I thought, oh, that's quite neat. But I thought, come on, you know, how old would you have to be for that to be relevant? You'd have to be my age. Oh, maybe that ad's aimed at me.
Right.
So it worked a bit slowly. Yeah. I got there in the end. But
they had a whole series of them as well. That Spotify campaign is great.
Yeah,
the
really
UB40 one, that's good.
Yeah, I was explaining them to my wife yesterday, who's a similar age, the UB40 one and the red wine.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're just, I spotted actually weirdly, I did spot them on LinkedIn first. But a lot of respect was going around about proper craftsmanship of writing. I mean, it's a smart idea anyway, but then there's something about the way they're just, you can tell the lines have been really, really worked at. And I think outdoor, they work brilliantly on buses. I mean, that's what I've seen mostly after LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I think it was Sean Thompson who's written most of them, Who, What, Where, Why. Is that what they're called?
Yep.
Thanks. Hopefully it is. But no, I'm pleased you mentioned that one. That's one I really like this year.
I mean, who knows how well they will do? I mean, whether that matters or not, whether how awarded something is validation or not. But, you know, I think there's a tendency perhaps to, these days, to think, well, unless it's digital or there's something strange that happens to it and it needs a case study film to accompany it, jurors won't reward it. But I've got a hunch that campaign might do quite well. And
Maybe.
also the Whopper ad that came out last week before the election.
Yeah, we talked about it. It was definitely more stunt than ad, which is quite interesting. I think there are a number of advertisers or agencies thinking about the out-of-home space, the outdoor space, as a stunt ad because it can live beyond the the medium that it's designed for.
Yeah.
Can I give Dan some kudos here? So he spotted it first of all and said, hey, this is great, let's talk about it. And then I think it was about an hour or two later, Dan went, hold on, you can't put HFSS products on the side of a bus, high fat,
sugar, salt.
I should know that. And immediately got on to the people and they said, yeah, it was a sort of cheat.
It was an old Route Master. There's an L side, which don't exist anymore. And
it wasn't driven around. But I think fair play to them, they did it. We talked about it and Paul talked about it as well. And I think it was, that may be job done, right?
Yeah, it was great.
I mean, one other thing I was going to ask before we go a bit more into detail was when a brief comes into the department, are out-of-home briefs as revered as they once were, do you feel? Or are they... I mean, when I was a kid, actually still now, if I get for me, the most exciting brief is either a film or a poster. Do you feel there's the same respect or love around them?
I don't get the impression that there is, but it seems like there are fewer of those briefs anyway. I don't know whether that's the case or not, whether it's...
Do you think there's the same passion for those briefs when they do hit the agency, those kind of the older, more traditional formats? Is there, your younger creative team still writing out a 48-sheet poster as part of their idea?
I would hope so, because I think it's still... if you can persuade everybody involved in the process to keep it as simple and pure as possible and avoid the temptation to clutter it with stuff it doesn't really need, then it should be a great opportunity to do something, I think, because of the purity that's required to make a good poster?
Because I think the digital piece, the moving thing, is a completely different discipline. It's like a 10-second ad, isn't it? Or 20, depending on the sort of loop cycle you've bought. Whereas the flat, simple, fuck off headline or visual is a different discipline. Because I think, we get quite a lot of briefs, which are kind of, they're like the digital thing. So you're saying to a team, okay, you've got to come up with a poster, but you've got 10 seconds. It's sort of counterintuitive slightly, so it's sort of, there is a skill, isn't there, in just doing the poster, the billboard, I suppose.
Yeah.
We're seeing more and more briefs coming in here that are what's called subtle motion. So rather than having a full motion out-of-home ad, they're almost kind of cinematograph type things where you've still got your classic headline, but just the water's rippling, or just a seagull flying through the sky or something, and that's part of it is to get away from the kind of roadside. In some roadside formats, you can't have full motion video, but actually it lends itself to the craft for the medium, so they can still be tactical. They can still be, a night sky or a day sky based on the time, but you get that nice piece of animation that goes with it.
A little bit of steam coming off a burger.
Yeah.
A bit of bacon. Just on one last thing on the great work of the year or stuff you've liked lately, I feel sad that there's no Economist posters anymore hitting people's lists of the year. So I know we're not going to talk about Economist straight away, but I do feel whenever we used to do a list, or Campaign would do, their top 10s of the year, there would always be one or two, and I think it feels a bit sad. I just wonder what on earth has happened.
Because The Economist do a couple of things every year.
Yeah.
Maybe not with the same level of success that they did historically, but this year one of the teams did a poster on a van that went around Parliament Square.
That was one of my favourites.
So that was this year.
Brexit thing, yeah.
Going around in circles.
Okay, so it's just maybe less activity rather than...
I think the main activity is more direct and promotional, but The Economist are very good at when they spot an opportunity for some kind of digital outdoor or stunt, they'll come to AMB.
Yeah,
I think given the kind of political climate that we've been in for the last few months and the run up to the election, but led by donkeys, are the ones who have kind of taken the mantle on from The Economist to be that we're going to disrupt this space with a challenging statement. And whether that's an old tweet from the Prime Minister where he's obviously backtracked, or whether it's a statement they projected on the side of the Houses of Parliament, which is familiar to you, right?
Very familiar, yeah.
They've done the Advan thing where they go and stalk Nigel Farage when he's been on the campaign trail. So they've kind of taken up the Economist mantle, and they've gone, right, okay, we'll use this space for a political
without
message.
any of the approval worries.
Yeah, they've done it. Well, they definitely started as a kind of guerrilla movement.
Yeah.
So
I just wish it had been more successul. That's
That's another podcast, isn't it?
Podcast, yeah.
I had to explain to the CAN jury, out of home jury, what it was, because they were looking at a tweet on a billboard. So obviously a room full of creative directors going, no explanation. I really don't know what that's all about. And I had to stop everyone and say, well, actually, it's a really interesting story for them.
It didn't get anything, did it?
Nothing.
Not even. Yeah, it is a shame that, but I think that might be its strength and its weakness, maybe.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a great story.
Was there a case study film that went with it?
No. It was. I mean, it just went into the billboards category, so there's no film that can go with it. It's just a picture of the billboard up.
I think that's back to your point a bit, isn't it?
Well, I think you're right. If you told the story and put those billboards in context, then I think it would have done much better.
Yeah.
And in fact, if it had gone into... the problem is it's crowdfunded, right? So they're less interested in spending all that money on award entries, I guess.
Also, I guess once you embark upon a case study, you have to show results at the end of it.
And
Questionable what the results are.
What does success look like for those guys? I mean, it started out as a sort of one night. Let's just do this. And they now, I mean, they've got a book. I bought that book the other day, and it's just brilliant hearing it. But you're going, a bit more success, bit more. They're on the TV. Like you said, it's a shame it didn't have a more positive outcome. But I mean, I wonder whether a year or two ago they would have even imagined they would have so much publicity.
Yeah.
Okay, Tim, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about billboards. And you've done many billboards at many agencies. DDB, Legs Delaney, Simons Palmer, BBH, Abbott Mead is a quick run through where you've worked. But the one campaign we really want to talk about today is, I think it was at your first agency, DDB, and it was for John Smith.
Sorry to interrupt there. It was called BMP in those days. Those Massimi Pollitt.
I stand corrected, sir. BMP. So this is a campaign for John Smith's Bitter. Could you possibly, first of all, just describe the work for us, and then give us a little bit of background of how it came about?
Well, the campaign is a series of half-finished billboards. You probably see this occasionally when you walk past a billboard, that maybe half of it's fallen off or one of the sheets has fallen off. There was a real example of this recently with Mr. Blobby appearing from, I think it was a BT,
right?
One of our accounts, I think it was a BT poster of, it's quite a bizarre poster in the first place. But it had a lady in the bath watching something on TV. And this was posted on a site in Leicester.
Right.
And who knows why. The poster underneath it, or the previous poster, had Mr. Blobby on it.
That might have been a Tesco's poster?
Possibly,
the price throwback, yeah.
Anyway, whether the relevant sheet detached itself of its own accord, or it was a piece of guerrilla sheet detachment, Mr. Blobby began showing through and made this very disturbing image of a lady in the bath with Mr. Blobby waving at her.
Right.
So that's evidence that the thing does happen for real, but our idea was to kind of fake it, really. So to create some billboards that one half of them was a John Smith's poster, and the other half was for some completely unrelated product. But by putting the two things together, it made a hopefully amusing joke.
Shall I read one of them off? We've pinned them up behind you, or you could probably tell us. Was there one that was your favourite? There's a very un-PC one.
Well, I was about to say they haven't aged very well.
I think the DIY one would work.
Okay, well let's do the DIY one.
Yeah, what does that say?
So the DIY one the left-hand half of the poster shows a guy scratching his head and looking at a wall that he's about to plaster. Plaster would have been a better... It's trouble. 30 years later, I thought of a better headline.
Always thinking.
So the headline says, "Forget your DIY worries, new miracle, John Smith's." I can't read the bottom line. "The old place will look completely different after 4 cans of Yorkshire's finest." So basically, one half purports to be an ad for Polyfiller or something, and the other half is for John Smith's. And it's a joke about drunkenness, I suppose.
It's very good. I'll read the other one because I'm normally in front of HR most places I work, so this just won't be a surprise. "Make it a night she'll never forget with..." So the left-hand side is a man and woman embracing, and then it says John Smith's. It says at the bottom, "Just watch her face light up when she finds the lads are coming round." But they're
different times.
Yeah, different times.
Different times.
But they're beautifully executed. They are...
Well, Peter Gaussis, who was my art director, deserves the credit for that.
Tell us more. I mean, because before we were on air, Dan and I were looking at them and going, I wonder how you put them together. Or could you actually, sorry.
Very quickly was the answer.
Yeah. Could you backtrack?
Probably tell.
Could you tell us, so you've described the work, could you though tell us how you got to this idea in the first place and how you sold it to the client?
There's one of those terrible inspirational quotes, which is something like, "Luck is when preparation meets opportunity." So I can't pretend this was preparation of any real meaningful sort, but it was an idea that was kind of buried in my adolescent psyche. And as ever, as anyone who works in a creative department will know, the best time to get your work through is when the client's desperate for something to run.
Right.
And excuse me, luckily in this situation, there was a campaign that John Smiths had bought by another team, written by Dennis Willison and Julian Dyer, which was all about other famous Johns. So it was John Cleese, I can't think of another John now, but basically it was other kinds of John versus John Smith.
Right.
And it was quite funny, and it worked quite well. But I think at the last minute, they decided they couldn't afford to pay for all these. They could afford one or two, but they couldn't afford an entire campaign. It would have broken the budget. So
Because of the image rights for all the
Yeah.
Johns.
So at the last minute, they'd prevaricated for a while. At the last minute, they said, "Look, we're going to have to pull the plug, but we still have, we've booked the media, so we need a campaign." So it was the classic. We got briefed on a Friday, and they wanted it by Monday. And I kind of hesitate to share this with your listeners.
There won't be that many, don't worry.
Okay. But I grew up in Uxbridge, and there's not much to do in Uxbridge. And to my shame, when I was about 12 or 13, my friends and I used to go into Uxbridge High Street, go into W.H. Smith, and would occasionally shoplift things. Just because thrills were short on the ground in Uxbridge when you're 12, and possibly now. And one of the things I shoplifted was, I've got it here actually, because knowing that the podcast is a visual medium, I brought in some reference, but I was very into a thing called Mad Magazine, which I don't know if it still exists even, which was an American satirical magazine that did spoofs of movies and TV shows and had lots of kind of funny stuff in it. And they used to do compilation books, and one of the books that I shoplifted from W.H. Smith, I'm really sorry.
We're going to pay them back after this.
It was 30 pence, I think, which
Okay.
tells you how long ago it was. One of the books I shoplifted was they used to publish these compilation paperbacks of old Mad magazines from the 1960s. And one of the ones I bought had this idea in it. I can't find it now. Half-finished billboards. So I should have really kept quiet and claimed that I came up with this amazing idea of half-finished billboards all by myself. But
Let's have a
I
look at
didn't.
that.
It comes from about 1962 or something, I think. There's this article in this mad book, Half-Finished Billboards. This is so much better than the ones we did. Not a whisper of bad breath with new Ajax, which was a scouring powder. Brush your teeth right down the drain.
Oh my God, there's loads of them.
Yeah. Dogs drinking wine.
Oh, this is brilliant. This sort of
Oh, we're going to have to take some photos of that and put them on the feed.
this
for the
reaffirms my
podcast.
faith in scrapbooks and bottom drawer ideas. This is a perfect example.
So there's one that's a
This
mashup.
since you were 12 years old.
Yeah.
Not knowing that you were going to
No,
be
of
one of the
course
most
not.
successful copywriters ever.
Yeah, but
Brilliant.
in those days, you had about 3 books, so you just read the book over
It
and
was-
over again. So
it was
all that
fate.
stuff.
Did you sorry, just to jump in. So, actually, no, keep going. Tell us how it happened.
I was going to read one more out, which
Go on.
is it's a mashup of a dog food poster and a whiskey poster. I mean, they've gone to town on this one a bit. Make your dog an eager drinker. Dogs love Calvert Reserve. Full 86 proof blended whiskey with lean red meat. 65% grain neutral spirits to help your dog grow. Yeah, and there's loads of them.
So the other 2 books that you shoplifted, are we going to find all of your other ideas from the last 30 years? We're going to
Possibly, yeah.
a book full of Economist ads. And
But I mean, that was more brought about by, because I said it's great to have a brief where the client has to buy something quickly to fill the space, but also it comes with its own terrors. You think, well, we have to come up with something. And that just popped into my head. So we actually went back to our CDs, who are Alan Tilby and Paul Lees, with about 5 campaigns, I think. But rather depressingly, they liked the one that we'd stolen rather than the ones we'd come up with ourselves. So, but we'd disguised it well enough, and I don't think they were readers of Mad Magazine. So
and
we got away
the
with it.
clients loved it, so they bought it.
I think the clients were just grateful that there was going to be something on the billboards at the time.
And did you? You never want to sell an idea which you can't produce. So did you have a think about how you were going to physically produce it, or was it one of those sort of desperate moments? Just show them something, and then we'll figure out how to do it after.
Yeah, it's very much that. I think.
Right. Good. And how did you? So how did you produce it then? Did you literally do? I'm hoping it's not this, but maybe it was. Did you literally do every site, like fly posted each site, or did you shoot the ad and then stick it up, if you know what I mean? Did you shoot it as if it had happened and then put those posters up, or did you put it up separate posters? I'm not making myself clear, am I? Do you know what I mean? Like, did every time they put these up have to put separate 48 sheets, or did you shoot that?
No, we shot the fake ads.
Thank you. Sorry, that could have been a cleaner way of saying it. Apologies.
We shot we shot the fake ads, but that brought. Sorry, I'm turning away from the mic. To look at the posters. We shot the fake ads, but that brought with it its own problems because the poor guys used to posting the posters
This is what I'm thinking.
got very confused, and
I
a lot
bet.
of them were misposted and had to be reposted.
Oh, genius. Because I love the craft of you've got the slight mistakes. You know, I can see you and Pete have made a beautiful job of making them look like what you want them to look like. Do you know what I mean? Like with the sort of creases and that they're not quite joining up exactly right.
Well, that's partly Peter and partly the few guys who did manage to post them correctly. So some of them did have to be reposted. And then, again, younger listeners won't remember, but in 1987 there was the Great Storm, which was where the weatherman Michael Fish famously said, someone's rung up and asked me if there's going to be a hurricane this evening, and I can assure you there won't be. And there was. And it blew down half the poster sites as well. So it was quite an ill-starred campaign. Having saved the day by coming up with the campaign, it was first misposted, and then quite a few of the sites blew down. But
Was it, I mean, nowadays you get, well, this is actually, in the old days you go, well, let's have a non-traditional poster. Was it one of the first times where someone had sort of subverted the poster genre in a way of, because it's so stark what you've got there. It looks like half a poster and then half another one as John Smith has arrived and saved the day. I'd never seen anything like it before. Did it have quite an impact when it came out? Were people saying, how'd you do it? You know, all that kind of stuff.
no, nobody asked me that. Maybe they were all Mad Magazine readers and they just thought, they've beaten us to it.
My favourite one is the enjoy the exotic taste of Yorkshire bitter, because I can do the voiceover in my head with the Yorkshire accent as it's just interrupted. And all the way from Sunkist Tadcasters. It's brilliant. It's very good.
It was a rush job, really. It was just what are the best gags you can think of written down, and then can you make them work visually, and can we shoot them in a week? Or whatever it was. And
do you remember the ones that got away on that response?
No.
Because they are beautifully put together. I mean...
Oh, you're very kind to say that, because I think they split juries. I think if you look in...
Did they win a lot? They got it at D&AD, right?
I think if you look in D&AD, and this is not sour grapes in any way, but D&AD in those days used to publish some of the jury comments. And if you look back at the annual that this got into, eventually, there's another story there, it says the John Smith posters divide the jury, and one juror is quoted as saying they look ugly.
Oh, for the love of God!
Which they possibly do, but they kind of have to. They kind of have to look ugly, I think.
The beauty is the ugliness, right? There's for me.
Surely they're ahead of their time. If you don't mind me saying.
Well, they're behind the time because they were stolen from a magazine in the 1960s. But
tell me more about the D&AD. Or you not
well, again, to add to my charge sheet, having shoplifted the book in the first place, we entered them for D&AD that year and didn't get in.
Really?
Excuse me. So things were a little bit more lax in those days. So without even telling our creative directors, we entered them ourselves the following year.
Good.
And they won a pencil. And rather than firing us, they said, we'd better reimburse you for the money you spent entering them.
Brilliant.
So
Brilliant.
So they were done in 1987, but they didn't get into D&AD until 1989 because they were into 2 years in a row, which you're not supposed to do. But
What the hell?
I'll give the pencil back. I'm sorry.
And the book.
Yeah.
You've got a few others. I think they're amazing. I mean, I think they really stand out. I think they'd work now. I mean, obviously the headlines might need to change slightly.
I think they would. I had to do a talk for the department last year, and I realised I could only really show one of them.
Yeah. Which was DIY
It
probably.
was the DIY one, yeah.
Yeah. Did you... Sorry, this is not quite related, but I think I was interested in talking about Pete. So I've noticed throughout your career, it's been Tim Riley or Tim Riley plus an art director. Is this... are you comfortable... Do you like being more on your own or a sort of a flirtatious... working with lots of different art directors? Is that all? Because you quite often you have teams who are, X plus Y, and that's how their whole career is.
Yeah.
Yours hasn't. Is that?
No, I wish it had.
Oh,
I wish it
Tim.
had. The search for a life partner goes on. I don't know. I'm an old misery, I think, and I'm better. I just like to sit there and try and work it out myself. But it is, I've been lucky enough to work with some great art directors, I think. So
Who were you?
Lucky me.
Yeah. Who did you work long? Was it Pete your longest?
Pete I worked with twice. I worked with him for 3 years at BMP as it was then, and a couple of years at AMV as well. He's about longest, but I worked with Andy Mackay, Joanna Wenley, Rob Oliver. Yeah, I've been pretty lucky, really, because they can make your terrible headlines look really good.
I'd like to ask you about that. The craftsmanship of writing billboards. Do you sit down to start writing? What mediums are you most happy in? We kind of talked about that it's actually quite hard to, you get briefed. Oh, can you bring the headline down so it'll work on a billboard? But if you had, all mediums sat right in front of you, which one do you think you'd pick out first? This is why I want to start writing.
I think probably like you, I'd probably pick film, particularly because these days despite what we said about the purity and discipline of condensing a thought into 8 words, these days, as you know, you can do a long cut of your film, so you can wang on for ages when you portentous voiceover and bits of dialogue and stuff. So it is nice to be able to stretch a little bit. So while it's great to practice the craft where possible of concision, it's also nice to be able to stretch out a little bit. So yeah, I bet you always want to have both things, don't you? So for me, sadly, there's a great pleasure in being able to try and, I'm sure we can get another word out of this. Yeah, you can reduce that line to 6 words or 5 words even, or 7 words when it was 13 half an hour ago. But also there's a pleasure in, being able to do a 90 cut of something or a 2-minute cut if it'll sustain.
That's quite perverse. Reducing one, extending the other, isn't it? I mean, actually, that's a very nice link to what we have to talk about is The Economist. So you've been a writer and a creative director on that account since 1996. Is that correct? Is that when you joined?
I joined AMV in 1996, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was only CD on it for about 2 years.
Okay.
But it did pass around quite a lot.
So I'm intrigued by what was it like being a writer on The Economist? Was it fiercely competitive? I've heard stories of people walking around with like 40, 50 layouts being 60. Were you one of those people?
Well, in those days, The Economist was a brief that went to the entire creative department. And AMV then, as it does now, had a very stellar department, very senior department in those days, all full of people who had their D&AD pencils, in some cases black pencils. No less competitive than it is now, but the competition was fierce. So the brief went into the department twice a year, and everybody wanted to get one of their ads in the batch of 10 or 12. So maybe 20 posters ran a year. And I think the first time I took a stack of work into David Abbott, I counted them up. There were 70.
Wow.
And he went through them very politely and went, "Oh yeah, yeah, I've seen that one, yeah." And at the end, he went through the entire batch, and of course, being David Abbott, he'd seen every Economist ad known to man, I think. I think he'd probably seen most of what I'd done before, because they were probably just ill-judged first attempts at writing an Economist poster. Because I think everyone looks at them and thinks, because they look so effortless when they've been done. You assume, or I assumed in my immodesty, well, I'll just knock out a few of those, it'll be easy. But he put me right. He said, yeah, it's a good start, I think. But, I think it's probably worth carrying on.
Right.
And I think he was right.
I
think they got better after that.
I mean, would you normally put them into the good pile and the...
I was hoping you would, but it was just one pile.
One pile,
which
right.
you then handed back to me.
I remember,
so a good lesson.
I remember working with Hegarty. Me and Adam went in once with a stack of work, and he started doing this pile thing. And I was thinking, Christ, we've got a lot of good work through here. And then just at the end, he moved one to the other pile. So that was one. And he said, there may be something in this. And then we left and did some more work. But it's amazing because that distillation to get to greatness. And then you look at it and you go, oh, yeah, another great Economist ad. Brilliant. But, the hidden, 400 or 500 ads that were probably passed through. And was that a continual thing? Did it, was it twice a year, open brief to the department, and David was the final?
David first, then Peter Souter, then Dave Dye, I think. And actually Dave Dye, I don't know whether he still has it. When he was CD on The Economist, he actually produced a massive, it was almost like a billboard that was hung up in the creative department, and it showed it was like a funnel diagram. It had on it thumbnails of every single idea that had been presented to him. So it said what the creative director sees, then beneath that it had what the client sees, which is a smaller group of maybe 30 posters, and then beneath that it had what the public sees, which was 12 posters.
Wow.
So it physically represented the vast amounts of dodgy puns about business and strange visuals that were created that ended up in...
We must ask Dave for that.
I think he's lost it, because I think he asked me if it was still knocking around at A&V anywhere.
Dave, if you're listening, please start looking for that. That's amazing. I love that. Because that in some way will explain to people what's going into...
And did the department always look forward to those 2 times a year, or did it start to become the dread of
well, I think
500 ideas to...
I think if the entire department's working on it, that removes the dread of, or the fear of failure, I think. But I think it probably did require stamina.
Yeah, there must be fatigue in that stuff, so there must be...
Well, it's interesting that sometimes ideas that were rejected in one batch would re-emerge a couple of years later, perhaps if the CD had changed or circumstances had changed. And notwithstanding the fact that David, Peter, Dave, Nigel and Paul were all rightly very, very tough on the work to get to the best stuff. If you timed your run to perfection, if you held a couple back, there would always come a point near the end of the process where an email or a memo, as it might have been in those days, would go around saying, we still need 2 more posters.
Oh, yeah.
Because there'd always be reasons why, some of the more stellar executions couldn't be done, or someone at The Economist had a reason why they wouldn't sign it off, or... there was...
kind of becomes a game of chicken. I'm going to hold this one back. Oh, no, it might go in the next batch.
Well, maybe not hold it back, but be prepared to have enough stamina to have another go at it.
Can you remember your first one you got through?
Yes, I can.
Was it Can I Call an Economist Reader?
No. It was... well, it kind of came true, actually, that, being smart asses, we thought, well, how can we do something on The Economist that's never been done before, and we came up with this rather lame idea, because the posters, of course, were red, and it was something about avoid going this colour, or it was about avoid embarrassment. And we made a rookie error in that, looking at the layout, we thought, well, the headline should be set really small, because then it directs your eye to the red that surrounds the headline. And of course, when this was posted, you couldn't read it; it was too small.
Right.
And once we reposted it with a slightly bigger headline, it just looked like the world's worst economist headline, which it probably was.
So did it run?
It was kind of a flawed. So it ran, but it wasn't really very successful.
It never made that book.
It certainly didn't. No, I think it's been buried in landfill somewhere.
Well, that's very honest of you to say. So can I go on to Jordan?
Before you do, can I ask, do you remember your very first billboard, rather than just The Economist? Do you remember your very, very first billboard?
Or your first good one?
No, it might have been John Smith's, actually.
Oh, really?
Because, as you say, billboards were always a prized brief. And perhaps in those days, when there wasn't the variety of disciplines open to you, that in terms of hierarchy, probably after a TV brief, a poster brief was the next most coveted. So,
yeah, I wonder what that order looks like now. With we've got digital mediums, we've got advertising in our pocket, we've got it on our desktops. I wonder what's the hierarchy now? TV ad and cinema ad. The cinema version is still up there, obviously. It's still.
I think so, yeah. But I guess it always depends what it is you can do with the medium that you've been presented with. That if you can subvert whatever medium it is in an interesting, relevant way, then maybe some of the less glamorous ones could be a goldmine.
Well, a video embedded in an email. That's one of my most recent ones. Won a direct marketing award for it.
Yes, I saw that.
So I just very quickly wanted to go back to Jordan, possibly my favourite Economist poster ever. How did that come about?
Well, I don't know if you have this at your workplaces, but we had we have Secret Santa every year. And last year I got, because I'd done a Nike ad with Michael Jordan in it, and then the Economist poster with Jordan.
Is that Michael Jordan 1, Isaac Newton nil?
Very good. Can you just briefly describe the Economist ad, just in case listeners aren't aware of it? Sorry.
The Economist ad says something like, somebody mentions Jordan, you think of a Middle Eastern country with a 3.3% growth rate.
Thank you.
So my Secret Santa was just books about Jordan. I got Michael Jordan's autobiography, Katie Price's autobiography, and a guide to Jordan, the country. So, good burn.
But it must have come about by, again, were you thinking, let's just subvert all of this business stuff? Jordan must have been everywhere, and did you just go, fuck it, let's just do that little play off it? Or? Well,
she wasn't those days. I think there was a concerted attempt to try and break out of what had been a very successful run of posters. The initial posters were all about how it was a business tool and helped you get ahead. And I think in an attempt to broaden it out, there were that people made concerted efforts to think, well, what's the least likely thing you could link to The Economist and still make the right kind of point? So I suppose it was in that area. But it actually came from someone else in the department. When I was CDing it, they had a line which didn't quite work. When Ariel Sharon was in charge, they had a line that said something like, it was something about, it had Sharon in the headline, and it was something about, no, not the person who... So it was confusing Sharon with a female called Sharon, basically. Sharon and Sharon.
Right.
And of course it works. It didn't kind of work, because one is Sharon and one is Sharon. So when you read it to yourself, it doesn't work. And I said to the person who wrote it, what if you made it Jordan? Because not very imaginative, but that's also in the Middle East, and that would work. And they said, nah, I don't like it. I said, no, I think that would be really good. No, I prefer it like this. So I wrote it down.
I'm feeling pain for this person.
I wrote it down and took it to them and said, what do you think? They went, no, I don't like it. I mean, seriously.
And the rest is history.
Well, it may not be history, but...
How did you... So in the process then, you put it in as one of the 10...
Well, I was a CD at the time, so I was allowed to.
Okay. Oh, which great.
Abusing my power.
Yes.
But I showed it to other people, and they said, "Yeah."
Because that was my next thing I was going to ask you. Did you, having been a writer on it and a CD on it, did you prefer one role or the other? You know, they're kind of, because there must be quite a lot on your shoulders. You know, having this body of work brought to you, and you going right, and they're going, God, he's picked that one, or you know, God, what happened to Mark? You know, or do you prefer to be the guy chucking them in a carefree manner?
It was never carefree, but yes.
Yes, in a very considered Tim Riley-esque fashion. Sorry,
I didn't mean that. It was more like blood, sweat, and tears. But yeah, I'd prefer to be the person trying to come up with them, because I think you're right. Heavy as the head and all that, to try and, because you've got this weight of history bearing down on you, you know. And sometimes you choose badly. I mean, on one occasion, a team did an execution which I thought was strategically wrong. I didn't even present it to the client, and the following year it was done in Singapore for The Economist. I think it was The Economist as a search bar, so The Economist was rendered in kind of Google style type. And you know, my feedback to them was, well, The Economist is more than that. It's not just a source of information. It's a, you know, right. it's an overview. It has a point of view. But maybe I was a little bit harsh. You know, maybe the pleasure of seeing The Economist rendered like a Google search bar trumps the fact that it's not on strategy.
That's interesting, because we spoke when you were being CD. I know I read somewhere that you said you wanted to move it on a bit, which is interesting because it echoed what Paul Belford said the other week when Paul kept saying, and he won't mind me saying this, but he thought, you know, just headlines out of Red wasn't much for him to play with. So when he got to Lightbulb, he was like, oh, great, you know. And that was definitely a start of a move away, which I loved. I loved the way that is an amazing campaign anyway, but then you can start playing with the medium. It was always had a little kind of a wit to it and a kind of a cleverness. And there was the one about when the headline was out of green.
Well, I was about to say, that's the one, that was like a revelation to me, that after, I think the campaign had been going for maybe 3 years or something. It was a series of beautifully written headlines, very witty, and then all of a sudden, Richard Foster and John Horton did one that was reversed out of green, and it said The Economist is full of surprises. Great. Which now doesn't, maybe it's not that big leap, but at the time I remember thinking, God, that's genius.
Yeah.
You know, they've established something which already is kind of iconoclastic, and now they're kind of tearing that up and doing something that's exactly the right way to behave. So I think pretty early on, Abbott Mead got to the idea of subverting what they already had, because it became a property quite quickly.
Yeah. And did you then actively encourage people to, you know, put things on blimps, you know, change colours, there's the
top of buses. That was
buses,
good one,
yeah. Paul and
well, to be honest, I don't think they needed to be encouraged by that stage. I think once Richard and John had done the green poster, and I think in that series they did a fly on the wall as well. They had a real plastic fly. They did a super site on the Cromwell Road with the fly on the wall. People kept stealing the fly. I think it was a real fly. So, you know, even in, that must have been maybe the early 90s or something. They were already pushing the medium then, I think. So, yes, the light bulb was amazing, but that wasn't the first time, I don't think, that people had done kind of interesting special builds.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing body of work. I mean...
I was going to say, the other interesting thing about it is if you... of course, everyone reveres The Economist now and always quotes management training age 42. But if you go back to D&AD for that year, it didn't get in as a poster.
Brilliant.
Its only entry is as a piece of copy.
Is that right?
So it didn't get a pencil. It didn't even get in the book as a poster. So I don't know what that says. But maybe very original things aren't recognised at first.
Well, like the John Smiths.
Oh, possibly.
Well, there's like BMW films at Cannes. It didn't have a category, did it? So it's the followers after that. I
mean, after that, then it kind of swept the board every year, I think. But it maybe took a while for it to get going.
Do you? I know this is a virtually impossible question, but of the entire Economist campaign to date, is there one you like the most? Not necessarily of your own, but just, or is there one style or series, I suppose? I mean, maybe the first one. I don't know.
Maybe this is too close to home, but the one I always thought was brilliant was, and the fact that he would just keep coming out with them, was one that David Abbott wrote, which said, "Would you like to sit next to you at dinner?" Which just absolutely nails why you need to read The Economist, and just a really genius insight and beautifully expressed, I think. So of the written ones, I think that's my favourite, because that really does ask the reader a searching question, I think.
Yeah.
That's in all their briefs now. That question is in all their briefs now. And we had one recently. They wanted to do some experiential work, and so they came to us to do some digital stuff around that. And those examples are in there when they explain the brand. They mention that. They say, well, they use it in their brief, so that's how you know it's nailed on as a headline.
John's back in the room after the squeaky door. Thanks.
Yeah.
He went outside. He went outside to tell everyone to shut up.
But I think the other thing that proves is that I think by that stage, David Abbott had been writing those headlines for 9 years or something. So the thing that working on The Economist taught you, I guess, was there's always something more there were always more ideas that after 2 rounds in a year, you quite often would think, well, I'm never going to be able to write another Economist ad again. But something would always bubble up, and even David was still writing them right up until he retired.
Yeah, but I the ones you showed me the other day, the hashtag Me Too, the Women's Day,
International Women's Day.
Sorry, International Women's Day. We should put those on the site as well. Those are great. It's amazing that a campaign can run for so long and still be relevant. It's I'm trying to think, as we're sitting here, of another Billboard campaign that has this longevity. I suppose Nike are amazing. They use billboards amazingly.
Yeah, but they're still campaign driven, aren't they? They have a theme. But this is it's just kind of a forever campaign, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then they have a product that is changing that changes every week. It's current affairs. They have something that they've got a point of differentiation for it. So
I'm aware. You have some work to do today, so we might have to let you go. But I suppose we had a couple more questions. One is, and we ask everyone this: do you have a favourite billboard of all time? I remember this ad never ran, but when I was at BBH, do you remember Roger and Andy?
Yeah.
And it just had a massive close up of Tyson's face, like when Tyson was just everywhere, and he was back, and it just went really small letters. It went boo. Which I thought, and it was Sky. And Adam and I had been slaving for 2 weeks writing these really clever headlines, and those fuckers just went and went, there you go, John. And I went, oh yeah, that's the one. I mean, the client didn't run it, but I remember that. The poison chalice
Rooney
thing.
one was famous for where they painted him with the
cross
flag.
George.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. And then I love the subversion online of it where he was holding Ronaldo's head after Ronaldo got him sent off, which I love that, because that was a kind of a meeting of a traditional billboard meets modern culture. So I think I love things like that where they have a life on, and I suppose that's where it is now, like the Kaepernick stuff.
We talked about it the other day, didn't we? There's a stat that says something like 1 in 4 billboards has been Instagrammed.
Wow, really?
Unbelievable stat.
On purpose, or?
Well, yeah, I don't know. We still haven't qualified it where it's come from, but it was on one of the industry body stats the other day. But it's because I think it's because the outdoor medium is so in your face. It's not, it's when you put an ad out there in the outdoor space, it's real. It's a real thing. I think it's why some of those smaller direct-to-consumer brands love being in the out-of-home space. Because they like to see their product out there. It's real now. People can trust. It builds that trust. And I think that when you've got a story to tell and you've got it in the outdoor space, you can do something that interrupts people's viewing. And I think that if it's that disruptive, people will take a photo of it and share it with their followers, and I think that's why you get that kind of stat.
You wouldn't take a photo.
Like the Whopper thing is a classic example.
Yeah.
Well, on that tip, I've thought of an answer to your question.
Okay.
There isn't one, or there isn't a favourite, but there is a campaign that I think, when I was starting out, when I was a student, really kind of inspired me and people of similar kind of age, which was for London Weekend Television that Gold Greenleaf's Trot did. And I think it was actually a media campaign, but they basically ran a different 48 sheet every week on the Underground for a different programme that was appearing on London Weekend Television that weekend. London Weekend used to be a channel that ran, was it Friday nights to Sunday nights? So it was like a 2.5 day TV channel, which seems a bit weird these days. And I think it was actually aimed at media buyers to say you should buy space in these programs because they're entertaining and everyone watches them. But they made the decision that the way to convince media buyers of that was to make them, rather than a trade campaign, to make it a public campaign that everyone saw. And they would absolutely pass the Instagram test that you mentioned earlier, Dan, that 1 in 4 posters these days are Instagrammed. Those posters definitely would have been Instagrammed because they were funny, they were serious. When there was a dramatised series about John F. Kennedy, one of them was a close-up of a hand holding a bullet, and the headline said, "In 1963, a missile destroyed America." So they did serious ones. They did,
but it was contextual. So it was the context was, this is what's on the on the channel this weekend.
Be
That's
on
great.
Sunday night.
What was the one with the corgis in? Remember that?
I think that was for the Royal Command performance.
That's
it was
right.
just a TV shot from behind, two corgis watching the television. They're not the greatest joke in the world,
But I love that campaign. The thing when I was at Watford College, I was shown this as an example of incredible billboards, and everyone at the time couldn't work out. I'm sure you know this, but so in those days, well, still sometimes now, their 48 sheets had to be pulled down and then stuck up again.
yeah.
And they kept the colour border.
Oh, that's
of
right.
the
Yes,
red,
that's
white,
right,
and blue, but they changed the inside
Yeah.
bit. So we were all going, "How the hell are they doing it so quickly?" And that again, another genius. I think
Pre-printed,
yeah, pre-printed trotty.
And that was also the branding. It was the 3-colour band, and it had LWT centred at the bottom. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm pleased you brought that up. We should definitely feature that on the website. It's amazing.
One of our first dynamic campaigns for Digital Out of Home was for GMTV, and it was a campaign that went live at 5 p.m. every day to tell you who was on the sofa the next morning.
Right. Great.
And it says 2010. It was just at Nike. We did the one for Nike Woke Up, and then this one was straight afterwards. But because they didn't know who was going to be on the sofa until 4:45, so they chose Digital Out of Home as the thing that they could get the public message, which is obviously going back to the same thing of LWT.
Yeah. The trouble is now, that's why I love digital in a way, because it can be so live. Your heart always sinks when you see an ad for the Olympics, and then a day after the Olympics, there's the ad for the Olympics. You're thinking, "Oh God, what are they doing?" And that is a great reason for using digital, I find.
people talk these days, especially agencies and their creds, about, we want to be part of culture. But that LWT campaign was definitely part of culture, because people used to look forward to what's going to be next week's Billboard,
Yeah.
We didn't have much to entertain ourselves in those days, I suppose. There were only 3 TV channels and no internet, so maybe, a good poster meant more in those days.
And Mad magazines.
Mad magazine. And as I mentioned earlier with the Secret Santa thing, The Economist wasn't the first time I'd done a Jordan poster. When I was at Simons Palmer, in the early 90s, Simons Palmer was a tiny agency, and miraculously we had the Nike account in the UK. In those days, Widen's in America did the main stuff, and there was no Wieden Kennedy London. It was just Simons Palmer. And briefs were few and far between. We basically got the crumbs from the table. I mean, literally. 3 times a year we'd get a brief for a poster or maybe a print ad. The Americans didn't understand rugby, so we got all the rugby ads we got to do because they didn't get it, and occasionally got a football one because they didn't understand soccer. But one year we got a brief to do the new range of Air Jordans, and they literally, this was pre-internet, they literally we got sent a transparency in an envelope from Portland. I remember opening the envelope and tipping it out, and there was a black and white shot of Michael Jordan, and the brief was, can you do a poster? You've got to use this image.
Right.
So
One image.
Yeah, one image. That was it.
In some ways, life was so simple then, wasn't it?
So it's basically a caption writing competition. So Andy Mackay, my art director, had it hand tinted because it was black and white, and we put a headline on it: Michael Jordan won, Isaac Newton nil, and that was it. But,
And the swoosh.
yeah, but you know, back in those days, you didn't know that much about Michael Jordan because he wasn't certainly in the UK. He wasn't maybe the huge cultural figure that he is now. So we had to do our research, and in those days, research wasn't done on the internet. We had to go out and buy American magazines that talked about Jordan, and in one of them, I found this phrase that said, because Jordan, as you know, was famous for what they called hang time, the fact that he could seemingly defy gravity. And one journalist in a profile piece in GQ or Esquire in America had described his game as an ongoing dialectic with Isaac Newton. I had to look at what dialectic meant, but I thought that's just an interesting way of expressing what Michael Jordan does. So once you'd read that, you thought, well, okay, you could compress that into 5 words. So
Yeah, that's a development of you've developed from the Mad magazine lifting to a sort of slightly more cerebral.
yeah, not a big step, but always be lifting stuff.
Yeah.
Really, I guess.
I think the word is inspired by. That's what Adam and I used to say anyway.
Inspired by.
Yeah. I think it's brilliant. You what's that thing? Tony Kay, you said you absorb.
So you've got tips for writing good billboards for the young creative teams.
Or any creative teams, like the older folk like myself, I could still.
I mean, you're probably beyond help, you, but
You mean writing as in the words, or coming up with? Because I suppose they can be visual as well.
Yeah, I think. Do you have any sort of set tips? You know, people. I think Dave Dye always talks about, you know, no more than 3 elements, or 2 if you have the end line on the logo.
Yeah.
You know, do you have anything like that?
I've got nothing to add really to everything that's already been said about billboards. That you've got to be concise. You know, someone described it as a visual shout. You just got to grab people's attention very quickly and relevantly, and you've got limited tools to do it with. Abraham Games said a poster should work on the back of a matchbox. That kind of thing. You know, it's got to be super simple.
yeah.
Or work in 10 or 20 seconds. So I'm not going to get back into that debate. I like the shout, the visual shout. I think that's amazing. That's a good way to maybe finish.
The visual shout.
The visual shout. Thanks for coming in and sharing your
Yeah,
visual
thanks, Tim.
shouts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking me. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, wasn't that brilliant? I love that.
I love that story from the Mad magazine, and
Yeah.
he stole that book when he was 12 years old.
So honest. Brilliant. I mean, that's great, right? That's, you know, nothing is new. You've got to come from somewhere.
Well, you're right, though. We talked about creative inspiration always comes from other things. We all sit and research. You know, we go to museums, we look through books, we absorb other media, and we get ideas from other areas.
The clever thing is joining the dots and making it your own. I mean, if he had literally lifted exactly those posters, then that wouldn't have been so good about the dog drinking the brandy. But in this case, it's the man drinking the John Smith. So I love that. I think that just makes me feel like I just want to go out and absorb more culture.
Yeah, it's good. Well, great episode. Obviously, you can read more on our website, getbehindthebillboard.com. You can follow us on Twitter at GetBTB, or you can follow us on Instagram at GetBehindTheBillboard.
Very good.
See you again soon.
Bye.